I'm very happy to be speaking with the Tyra Warner today. She is a PhD, so she's a doctor, a CMP, and attorney, and she's teaching at a coastal college in Georgia, having the department there. Her knowledge of the legal aspect is absolutely second to none. She made great point about force majeure, made great point about risk management, and also she ended our conversation with was probably my favorite point when it's come to legal, is the importance of human relations above the contract. So I hope you enjoy listening to Tyra and take good insight that you can apply in your business. Tyra, how are you?
I'm good, Eric. Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
And I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today. So interesting time we're living in. A lot of things happening, right?
It is. It's definitely interesting.
So you would have been in a legal or a risk management workshop 6 months ago, and somebody tell you we'll have a virus, we'll have a pandemia, and the whole world's going to be closed. How would you have reacted?
I probably would have said, I think you're overreaching. You're thinking we thought that with SARS, we thought that with swine flu, we thought that with avian flu. Don't be an extremist.
Yeah, exactly. And here we are. So first question straight into I would say the elephant in the room. What about force majeure? How does that play in with the whole situation?
Oh boy, force majeure is definitely the term of the day. If people didn't know that term before, they know it now. And how does it play in? It's definitely I think that's the word everybody's trying to figure out is when does it fit with regard to crises like COVID-19 and other things, and when doesn't it? And the thing with force majeure is it's so fact specific. I do get a lot of really direct questions like, well, is COVID-19 a force majeure? Or is this situation a force majeure? Is that situation? And the answer is, as it always is with lawyers, it depends. Because it does. It depends on all of the facts and the specifics and the date and everything that surrounds that particular situation. And it'll always be thus with force majeure.
So do you have maybe one or two examples that you've been faced with lately that can illustrate the point about force majeure and what happened?
Sure. Well, with COVID-19 specifically, as that's something sort of recently on my mind, a lot of what happened is as COVID-19 was marching its way to the United States and across the United States, as meetings were being planned, people were having to make the decision, do we carry on with our meeting or do we decide not to hold it? As COVID-19 was hitting California and marching its way across the United States, meetings in other parts of the country decided, okay, we're meeting in March. We're going to go ahead and not hold our meeting. And the question became, okay, well, Ohio or whatever is open for meetings, but you're canceling your meeting. So is it a cancellation or is it a force majeure? Well, until cities and started saying you can't hold any public gatherings, we're declaring illegal any public gatherings of more than X people, then that might have been a cancellation, a voluntary cancellation rather than a force majeure situation.
Wow.
So that was sort of the typical inquiry I was getting is if we do it now, is it a cancellation or is it a force majeure? But it's not a new situation. It's just applied in that situation.
Yeah.
I had almost the exact same situation come up with a hurricane in Florida, where it was, there was a city that was in the cone, of the hurricane, and a group was trying to decide whether to hold their meeting or not. The convention center said, we're open. Yeah, there's a state of emergency, but, come on down. We're planning to be open. We don't think the hurricane will hit. And the group said, you know what? We don't want to take the chance. We think it's a force majeure. And the convention center said, until we're sure it's coming, it's a cancellation. So it's not really a new situation for force majeure. It's just a different context.
I remember in 2001, I was still living in Brussels. I still had my cooperative agency, and we had a sales meeting with a pharmaceutical company. We're going to Jordan in October 2001. So everything was ready. We had done the inspection with the client, and of course, the tragedy of 9/11 occurred. And I would have said that being in Jordan on the 10th of September or on the 12th of September was the same. The perception was so tense that obviously we had to cancel. And with our partner, we made sure that they were paid for the work they had prepared already, and they were very gracious into refunding a lot of the cost. But I do remember that I had insured. I won't tell the name of this insurance company, but it's a global, well-known, based in London insurance company that suddenly disappeared because I had one call with a representative, their representative in Belgium. We had insured one specific evening in Beda, in Little Petra. And he basically told me, well, there is no war and there is no terrorist act. I said, what are you telling me? I should hope, between brackets, for a terrorist act and then immediately call you before the war is there? So that's how I get into the blur situation where you do have a force majeure, but playing on words. So this, how do you, as an advisor, as an attorney, how do you advise your customer when there's so many, you know, you have the hotels, you have the airlines, you have the insurance company, you have the customer who's obviously making a decision based on perception. Where does the all fit together?
You know, it's really hard for it all to fit together. And unfortunately, you often, you know, business people often have to make decisions before they really know how it's all going to come out. I think you bring up a good point with the insurers. You know, often when people are wrestling with a force majeure decision, one of the things I'll say is call your insurance company and ask them where they stand on this issue, because force majeure often goes hand in hand with event cancellation if they have event cancellation insurance. And you know, what I'm hearing right now with a lot of the fallout is, even if people thought they had a pretty solid event cancellation insurance policy, what they're finding now or they're finding out about all of the exclusions in those policies that they weren't aware of before, where they thought they had coverage for, you know, global health situations, government regulation, words that we thought we knew what they meant. And now our insurance companies are saying, oh yeah, that's not what we meant by that. So that's one thing I would say is you know, call your insurer and say, if we were to terminate our meeting, if we decided not to hold it, would, you know, cancellation insurance cover? You know, so, and another, of course, even predating that sort of decision would be deciding, do you get event cancellation insurance? Do you get travel insurance? Do you recommend travel insurance to your attendees to try to offset those expenses if you have to cancel a meeting? So you're not trying to, if they're not asking you for refunds for their canceled plane tickets and all of that kind of thing. But, you know, part of the decision, you know, it's a business decision you've got to make. And unfortunately, you just, when you have to make the decision, you don't have all those answers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But as an independent business owner, a meeting planner, we always try, you know, to plan in advance. So I get it totally now. I think it's a very good advice. Call your insurance company and ask them what to do. Now, when you look in the future, let's say that we're planning now for an event in a year. You really want to make sure that, because for a meeting planner, obviously is very important. For an independent business owners, that can make or break your company. Right. So what is the advice that you give people in that case when they're planning so far in advance? How could you even try to imagine every possible situation?
Sure. Well, you know, one of the things I always try to make sure that independent business owners remember is, you know, make sure to, you know, you want to give your client the best service you possibly can, but you also need to be very aware of who's taking on the lion's share of the risk in these situations. And that means be real aware of who's signing the contracts, in whose name the insurance policy is, in whose name the contracts are, so that if things do go south in the worst case scenario, as COVID-19 was, who's left holding the financial bag here? Is it the client? Is it your company? Mm-hmm. Is it, some apportionment of financial risk across the board? Because, I do know that some independents prefer to sign all the contracts themselves. I know some have an agency letter, signing as agent on behalf of their clients. Sometimes that goes bad. I've seen that go badly for independents a lot of times. Yeah. My advice is always have the client sign, depends on fee structure, depends on a lot of things. Yeah. But I think going forward, I think that's something that a business owner really needs to think about, is their own risk tolerance or risk aversion, and they need to set their business practices accordingly. Yeah. I think they really need to look at their own business insurance. And I think hopefully this latest crisis, more than anything, has made people really think about their own business continuity plans and their own emergency reserves, as far as, can we really operate? Can our business stay afloat if we are shut down for a certain amount of time? Because, we've always known that best practice says we need to have 3 months of emergency reserves where we can operate without business. But how many people actually have done that, personally or professionally?
Absolutely. That's a very good point. And there's also something that I was very cautious about, is linked to the risk, but it's also the risk of exchange rate. If you're planning an event in another country that is using another currency than the US dollars, or whatever your home currency, I would say, in another currency, there's ways to protect that, because you're obviously not somebody who's playing Forex, but it's really analyzing the risk, looking who's involved, and shifting or advising your customer about that risk, and making sure that you're not taking the risk where you should not be taking the risk. Is that the same of what you're talking about when it comes to the insurance, the contract, and everything?
Sure. I think that's, and I know different people and different professionals handle that different ways. I know some have open accounts in banks in different countries. I know there are a lot of different strategies for doing that. But certainly I think when there's a global crisis like this, you see those currency fluctuations. Mm-hmm. When there's political unrest, you see, we saw poor Greece's economy go, kablooey a few years ago. I do think that's a big thing that you have to watch for and protect about. So sure.
One thing that I've observed as well, noticed that it's always bring a smile to me when I think about it, is that the type of contract we have here in North America, and specifically in the US, compared to Europe and Belgium, where I'm from, where here you would have like 30 pages and then the addendum would be 50 pages. But quite frankly, in Europe, I'm not going to say nobody's going to read it, but it's almost like that.
Yeah. No, I know. I did some research once in Turkey, and I did I was doing an international comparison in, I think it was Turkey and China and or Korea. Was it Korea, China? Anyway, it was in Asia and Turkey and in the US. And in Turkey, they just literally scoffed with disdain at our contracts. And they just said, basically, you Americans don't trust anybody. And the contract, they were offended, that we would have these long contracts, because they were basically like, we're people of our word. If we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. Right. And I thought it was a really interesting perspective. We're truly a litigious society here in the U.S. I always tell people, it's not that we lawyers truly get paid by the word, although that would be nice. But speaking as a lawyer, but it's more that we're just trying to eliminate as much ambiguity as possible so that there are fewer misunderstandings. But you're right, the same contract does not fly all over the world.
And even with the same hotel chain, international hotel chain, you will have a totally different contract in, let's say, in Paris, that you would have 2 or 3 different properties. they would have their own contract, which would not be the case necessarily here.
Right.
So
Right.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that's where you've got to decide what your real hot button issues are, because you're definitely not going to negotiate the same.
Exactly, and that's also where I was coming back to you as an attorney. How an independent business owner that has to think of so many different things to run a project, to run her or his company, how can that independent business owner work with somebody like you in terms of all the legal issues and preparing contract and for each project that they have?
Well, I always think it's a good idea for planners of any ilk, but certainly for independent business owners to have a relationship with a legal counsel. And there are several good attorneys out there, that can help. And I don't, I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to see, have them have legal review on every contract, but I realize that's not realistic. But I think it becomes, this is where I think it's important to, to get educated on contract language. That's why we have so many, webinars and conference sessions and all of that, so that business owners and meeting planners know when they have a situation that should raise a red flag for them, and that's when they need to call an attorney.
Right.
And like I said, there's a lot of great attorneys that
Mm-hmm.
work by the hour or by the project. And if it's a high enough dollar situation, it's certainly better to pay a small amount for ahead of time to have something reviewed than a large amount later on when you're already in trouble.
Yeah.
When you've got a big attrition fee, when you've got a big, when you've got somebody that's injured themselves and you've got a, high dollar lawsuit on your hands, or
Mm-hmm.
big cancellation situation, or something like this with COVID-19. So, I think it's important to know who there are. And there's, like I said, there's great attorneys. The Academy of Hospitality Industry Attorneys is a great source to find the attorneys in this industry who know meetings and events.
Say that again. The Academy of
The
Hospitality.
Academy of Hospitality Industry Attorneys.
Okay,
And I'll be happy to share the link for that. That's where most of us who are in this industry who really know meetings and events are members.
that's awesome. I'm going to ask you about. I'm going to ask you a question about pricing structure, and I know there's legal things. So, if I'm asking a question, you can answer. You tell me immediately. But you know me, I always like to tell jokes, and I remember my grandfather telling me that joke of the guy going into the attorney office, and you see this beautiful gold plate that says, "Two question, $5,000," and the guy goes, "What? Two questions for $5,000? But who do you think you are?" So the attorney said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I did this law degree, this PhD. I work with the biggest firm, and then I started my own company. So that's absolutely justified. Now, what's your second question?" So, if I can ask, and if not, you tell me. But as an independent business owner, what are the price range I should be looking at? And also, probably more importantly, first, what is the type of structure I'm looking at? Is it per work, per hour, retention? What are the different opportunities that I have?
Sure. Well, for antitrust reasons, I'm going to stay away from the dollar amounts.
Got it. Okay.
Um, but I think most lawyers will charge either on an hourly, very similar probably to yourselves. Most will charge on either an hourly basis for hours worked, or on a project basis. So for a typical hotel contract, they might charge a project fee or a not to exceed fee, or for a client contract review, or if it's just, hey, I just want you to look at this one problem area, or I just have a question about this, then maybe an hourly or even a partial hour fee. This is my hourly rate, and if you just need 30 minutes, then it's just half of that. Some will do, if you usually retainer type agreements, or, that kind of thing, are for bigger clients.
Right.
But there's a lot of us who are either sole practitioners or small firms. that are used to working with small business owners, independents.
Right.
So we work very similar to the way that you work.
Right. Well, I don't plan meetings anymore for years, but the people I'm helping, the independent business owners I'm helping, I don't charge by the hour. First of all, I hate to keep timesheet. That's horrible. But I prefer to do like a flat fee or a project fee, or whether it's a mastermind or a course, whatever it is. But
Well, that's
yeah,
when I review contracts, and I don't have a lot of time to do legal work anymore. I'm so busy doing education mostly.
yeah.
But when I do, I usually do a project fee, and I usually do a not to exceed fee, because at this point in my career, I know pretty much how long it'll take me to do either
Right.
an overflow hotel, or a headquarter hotel contract, or convention center license agreement, which takes a little longer because of all the terms and conditions and policies and procedures and that kind of, so I can estimate, and I'll look at it first to see if it's a particularly awful one. And if it's a particularly awful one, then I'll tack on a little more time, because I know it'll be a little harder. So
When you say party awful one, or is there any horror story or funny story you can share without naming the customer?
um I don't know that I can tell you a specific one. But I have had some contracts, especially in just the last couple of years, that I just left me shaking my head. Just some of the things that, and again, please bear in mind that when I practice law, I represent the planner exclusively. So when I say awful, I mean hotels are being awful. Sorry, hotels. Um, but it's, my job. I think my job is, because hotels generally draft the contract. My job is to level the playing field a little bit, and make the contract a little more even in terms of the risk that the planner is taking and the hotel is taking. So, just in the last couple of years, I could remember reviewing and revising a contract by a resort for a planner group, and this group had met at this hotel, at this resort, very high level resort, very nice resort. But gosh, the terms in here were just, I mean, they were just, really, the hotel wasn't giving an inch. I mean, they were not going to give credit for early arrivals or late departures. They were not going to, there was a lot of stuff they weren't going to credit to pick up. And I mean, they wanted, more than 100% deposits up front,
Wow.
because they figured they'd spend more than they were actually planning to spend. I mean, it was just like that through the whole contract. I mean, I called the client and I was like, are you sure you want to meet here? Are you sure?
Yeah.
It was just one of those kind of contracts.
It's not the story of the guy who had bought cigars, insured them, smoked them, then claim that basically everything was burned from what he has insured, and then supposedly won the lawsuit, and then the insurance sue back because he had arson, or put the fire on purpose. I never knew if this story was true, but you heard so many stories. It's interesting. Sorry. One example, if I may share, for those listening, in terms of difference of way of looking at legal aspect between the US and Europe. When I was here in Miami with a client years ago, and we're doing the inspection, and then we're talking with the head of the transportation company. And he said, "How was last night?" I said, "That was great. Your driver came on time. The limo was wonderful. He knew very well the town. My customer really enjoyed it. You had placed his favorite drink. It's great. I think with all this glamour, it was unfortunate that you had plastic glass." And he looked at me and said, "Yep, well, a few months ago, you have to know, I had a bunch of kids, ran the limo, drank in the limo, got drunk in the limo, broke a glass, cut themselves, and they're suing me." And I was like, really? Because quite frankly, in Europe, you will never, first of all, if somebody would get drunk and cut themselves by breaking a glass, they will never think of suing anybody else than themselves to be responsible for in the first place. But then you will not find a lawyer who will defend the case. And most importantly, you will not find a judge that will take the case. So, and so here it's like everything you you have to be cautious with, because some people are doing a sport of that.
Yeah, well, it's true, and some people do. I mean, they've talked about, several years ago, ADA drive-by lawsuits were popular, where people would just not even go into a hotel, but sue them for Americans with Disabilities
Yeah.
Act violations.
Yes.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So you're an educator now. What are you teaching the students?
Um, well, we have a very small department at the College of Coastal Georgia. So I teach a little of everything, but my main classes are hospitality law and crisis management for hospitality. But I also teach the conference and meeting management course. I teach the hotel sales and service course, and kind of whatever else comes up. Sometimes I teach business law. I teach a crisis management and business course. So it varies, but we have a 3-person department. I teach with a couple of great guys, one who's a chef. So that's nice because he brings me samples. So that's always
Right. Very nice.
It is. It is. It's great. It's somebody was asking me just today, they're like, "You're a lawyer. Why aren't you practicing law full time? I mean, what a great job." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't think of myself as just a lawyer. I think of myself as being in the meetings industry, and being a lawyer was just part of being in the meetings industry, and
Right.
being an educator is just all part of that too, because now it's like taking all of that and giving back to the meetings industry. The law, having been a meeting planner, having been a convention visitors bureau salesperson, having been a catering salesperson for a hotel, all of that. Now I take all of that and I put it into my classes, and I feed it all and to the students, and hopefully build up the next generation
Yeah, absolutely.
who will go do those things, and introduce them to my cool friends like Eric Rozenberg and Carol Krugman and all these cool people who've been in the industry even longer than I have. And it's a cool thing to get to do.
And as you know, we're always happy to be available for the students anytime. That's very interesting situation that your student graduating this year are in, because they're supposed to be the greatest generation with the greatest economy ever in the last 50 years. And what do you think? How do you look at it, and how do they taking the whole situation?
It's been kind of tough on some of them. I was talking to one of my students, who's supposed to be graduating, and of course we're not having a commencement ceremony, a traditional commencement ceremony, and she's understanding. She's disappointed, of course, because this is it's a big time in her life, but. And her twin sisters graduated with her master's degree in England. And so they were supposed to have her graduation and then this graduation. And so, everything kind of got messed up. But, I think they're disappointed, but realistic. I think they're a little worried about how long this is going to go on, how long it's going to delay their start into the real world in hospitality, especially, and what that's going to look like. Is it, does it postpone? Does it change what opportunities are available to them? I think they're a little worried, honestly, that they were so excited about jumping into the real world with both feet, and now it's sort of like everybody's scared. Should they be scared too? They wanted to be excited, and that's the part I worry about for them. I mean, they're pretty resilient. But when they see, sort of when they see the grown-ups scared, where does that leave them? Yeah. So I don't like that.
No, yeah, it's really unfortunate, and as we both know, we'll be back, and there's always the situation, and I'm referring also to not only the students, but anybody who's got their business now is under 33 or 35 years old. It's probably their first crisis, and what a crisis! And we know we'll be back. It'll be different, but we'll be back. Have you seen already any change in contract that independent business owners should pay attention to? Any new clause that are inserted in contract right now?
I haven't really yet. In fact, it's something I'm just sort of starting to get around to doing research on. I think everybody's going to be revamping their force majeure clause as they do after sort of every big crisis comes along.
Right.
What I'm hoping they don't do, though, is go and make a pandemic clause this long,
Yeah.
because the next crisis won't be a pandemic. It'll be something else. It's kind of like, you probably remember after 9/11, everybody went and made a 3-inch thick binder on their terrorism plan.
Right.
But that wasn't but then they let it get dusty on the shelf because that wasn't the next thing that happened. There were other issues. But I think everybody does need to review their force majeure clause. And I think they need to be real clear on their cancellation. I think they need to review their cancellation clauses real clearly, be real clear on their liquidated damages. I think for the most part, people have what they need. They probably need to, I think some of the clauses that are going to be new, though, are going to be the clauses that refer to the new standards of meeting during this transition period, the sanitation issues, any technology issues pertaining to if they're going to, be using some technology for virtual or hybrid type meetings. If they're going to continue to do any social distancing measures, what maybe they need in terms of, if they only want one person per 6 foot instead of the standard 2 per 6 foot, that kind of thing. I think we're going to have some clauses around that. And I think some of the industry associations are trying to get together to try to help put that kind of information together and work that into clauses, but I have not seen them yet.
Interesting. I'd like to end our conversation talking about the human aspect of everything, especially with you being an attorney. My take has always been, my experience has always been that you can have the best contract or the worst contract. At the end of the day, is the human relationship that counts. And the best example I have is after the Icelandic volcano Eyjafjallajökull erupted, and the entire airspace was closed in Europe. It was on a Friday, and on the next Wednesday, we were supposed to go with an incentive trip to Vietnam. And on the Monday, so 2 days before, I called my partner in Hanoi, and I say, George, I even if the airport reopened tomorrow, it's going to be a mess, and people are scared. They don't know where the cloud is going. They are afraid to be stuck there and not being able to go home. So I think the best would be to postpone at no cost for the client. Are you in? And it took him less than a second to say yes. And I already had the email from the airline that they were accepting to postpone at no cost. So that's what we did. But it was on a phone call. They didn't have the email confirming. And the same when with my client, I told them we're going to postpone at no cost. And I didn't send any email. We're just in front of them. So I always believe that you can have the best contract. The most important thing is the relationship between the two parties. What is your take on that?
I completely agree with that. I think, and this is going to make me sound like an old woman. I think a certain amount of that comes with age and maturity level, because I do find that some people have not learned that yet in the industry, and some of them are in it for the bottom line, or some of them are too fast, and this is lawyers too, of course. Some are too fixed on the letter of the law or the letter of the contract, and but you promised, or this is the deal, or this is what it says, and kind of cut off their nose to spite their face, and can't see the big picture or the long game. And they end up, they're really hurting themselves. So I think it does take somebody who has a little bit more strategic mind and a big picture mind to see that the relationship is so much more valuable than the piece of business. And I think that does come with a little bit of wisdom and a little bit of experience.
That's the greatest final thought I could hope for. Tyra, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank you for sharing. Absolutely. And thanks for sharing your insight. And looking forward to seeing you face to face very soon.
Great. You too, Eric. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyra Warner, for spending time with me and sharing your knowledge about contract and legal issues. Made great point about force majeure, about risk management, and about the importance of human relations. I hope you all enjoy listening to her, that you get the good golden nuggets that you can implement in your own business. If you have any questions or if you have any idea of somebody you would like to listen to, let me know. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, on the Even Business Formula Facebook page, or via email. Thank you. Bye-bye.